Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Go Mode Podcast Boots Camp. For tonight, I will be teaching Ganon's Tower, Aga 2, and Ganon. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm about to reactivate my game audio, so if it's too loud compared to my voice, let me know. We'll fix it up real quick. So the reason I had this sitting on the game over screen is because across the course of a Rando career, you're going to see this a lot, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not, and hopefully you'll be seeing this a little less when you get to practicing. So first, Ganon's Tower has kind of a lot to it. The end game is it's a lot, so rather than get overwhelmed, we're going to start first by talking about an imaginary scenario. Ignore the fact that we're standing on the pyramid, but imagine you've just come out of your 7th crystal dungeon, and you're heading to GT. If you're here watching and feeling like you can genuinely benefit from this, I feel the first thing you should keep in mind is your bottle count. Right now, I'm looking at the NMG here, so I have 0. But essentially, you should consider, do I want to purchase safeties? At this point, you'll have to take stock of how much money you have, as well as if you already have some safeties. If you feel like you're good, you should trust in your read. If you feel like you're not good, you probably should go for it. And by not good, I mean any number of factors can apply here. You feel ahead and you feel like you wouldn't normally get safeties, but you want to be sure just in case. You don't have half magic, and you'd like to use that fire rod a little bit extra. These are all little factors that can come into play. I see more people are coming into chat, that's very exciting. So essentially, those are the things you want to consider. You also want to consider the texture of the seed a little bit, in that if Turtle Rock is your 7th crystal, you're not going to want to leave them out to go get more safeties after Turtle Rock. That's almost always going to be a poor choice. That's okay though, because if you had the Bug Net, there are still ways that you can get fairies within Ganon's Tower itself, either through the powder or the secret safety room. Now, we're going to go ahead and teleport to Ganon's Tower itself. Which, that was some great menuing by me. Well, fortunately, you would never use the practice hack menu in a live race, so don't worry about that. So, one thing I want to cover, this is just a bit, but if you have done the tutorial for general movement, when you open up Ganon's Tower, go ahead and have your hook shot out. You'll see most runners will usually try to have their hook shot out so that they can do that. Get a hook speed and you'll climb the stairs faster. Now with that, let's just go left and right in GT and just have a typical look at what you're going to be going through here. We'll talk about actual routing later. So in this first room, if you're going to collect the item, you just move to the right a bit and dash to the torch, no big deal. Ignore the fact that I managed to fail at collecting the item. Push your block, move into the next room. So this room, I'm going to cover 2 methods. Typically, you're just going to use the hook shot and go through. Now, we're going to go ahead and reset the room. So this is actually a good case of what not to do. Don't ever go back to that door, because then it's very annoying. The star doesn't regenerate. So you have to go a little further, reset the super tile. That means you have to do these hammer pegs again. So if you're backtracking in GT, keep in mind that that's a risk. That's not going to come up in most modes, so don't worry about it too much. Now, there's one scenario where, say you're getting to the point where you're feeling like you're staring down a hover seed and you just want to go for it. But your hover is good enough where you can get across the Moldorm 2 pit once if you have enough time. But it's not good enough you feel good getting across this pit with hovers. If this comes up for you, what you do is you bonk here, and you get here. Switch to bombs, do a spin buffer to get yourself on this pixel, and you'll just bomb across. That way you don't have to hover this part of the path. You can use bomb jumps for the rest of the left side path too, So you don't ever have to hover anything in GT except for Moldorm 2, unless you want to. So in this room, dealing with the Stalfos can be very annoying. You'll notice that I'm not worried about conserving my health too much, mostly because of the fact that generally, if health goes badly, you'll at least survive into the safety room using normal strats. You'll see here, I did make a mistake. I missed with a hook shot. We're going to go back to the north and cover each little bit of what I did, because I'm getting ahead of myself. Apologies. That's a good point. With Paradox Cave, that's true. So, coming out of this room, you're just going to hook south, and you can either bonk off here, or you can just hook south again. I like doing the little bonk. If you don't have the boots, you do have to take a longer path. You'll see when I go into this room, if you want to not deal with these being a problem, we're going to run by that again. I'm going to be holding down and right as I go into this room. And that way, just after a little bit, I hook immediately. Whether or not I get hit, once again, we're not worrying about health too much. It can be inconvenient if you lose a bunch of health, but it's not a problem. And that'll get you into position. You can either get hit, or you can just get out of the way if you're lucky. So, to answer the question in chat, how rare is hovering? You are going to play a whole lot of seeds on average, where it really matters. Sometimes you'll get unlucky and you'll have a few in short sequence, but that is really not the norm. In fact, I would say that I have had one seed in the past couple hundred where I really felt like hovering was very important. So that's just to give you an idea. That may not be typical, I may have been lucky, but it's not common that it matters much. Essentially, and we're going to talk about this again in Moldorm 2 time to emphasize this, hovering should be more or less near the bottom of things that you're prioritizing learning. So once you've gotten the map chest checked here, come back here. There are different ways to deal with this, and that'll change depending on your loadout. If you have a boomerang, you can basically get it around right here and throw it up and right, and then by the time you hit the door, that'll close behind you. You could also stand one tile to the north of where that was and throw it directly right and move south. That'll also work. You can also set a bomb or just use a Samaria block. Those are more typical strats, and sometimes you'll have the rare situation where you have a seed that's Samaria-less, and you don't have a boomerang either. Not common, but in that situation, you just have to use bombs. So just be aware of your resources. In this case, 3 bombs is enough for me to have, but if you go into GT under those conditions, just look at what you have first and make sure you're not going to have regrets. Remember, in normal item pool, you can always refill near the entrance to Ice Palace, as long as you have money. Now this room, once again, you can use bombs or Samaria. One thing, note of caution about Samaria, it's possible if you position this badly to do a double hit. In this case I didn't, so now I'm just looking like a fool, but that's okay. If you're going to be bad at something, be bad at screwing it up, right? So I'll show the other setup. If you're just standing here, you can face to the right, throw it that way. So that's nice. Now here, if you get about right here, throw the boomerang south, immediately turn and hook. With quick swap, that's going to be a little trickier, but I believe in you. If you practice, get the position right first, press R to go over to hookshot, because boomerang and hookshot are next to each other, and then turn and hook, and you'll get it. Unfortunately, with the practice hack, I don't have the ability to quick swap right now and show that to you, but essentially that's how you're going to get through that room. Now that room, that's a little simpler. You just move onto the tile, hook left, and as long as you're on like the right 50% of that tile, you'll go through. Now this room, you know, honestly, I kind of messed up with talking about this room. I'm going faster than I'm actually teaching. Okay. Okay, pre-fire snakes room. There we go. So we'll do that again. See. Get into position, turn, hit the block, and then you just use the iframes to walk through. You don't have to worry about getting onto that tile too fast, because by the time you get there, your iframes will wear off, and you can't go through a teleportation tile while you're invincible. Doesn't count. Okay, so for the room after that, there is a red boomerang strat that sometimes NG runners will employ. I don't know that strat, it's really hard, so I'm not going to teach it. But if you go into this room, if you have boots, just do a dash turn and bonk there. You'll go over the fire snake, and then you can proceed to the right. Obviously, you won't pause like I did. If you want to, you can hook into that block, and the reason you would want to do that, I'll show in a more uninterrupted sequence of this room. Well, I didn't do that right. Essentially, as long as you don't bump into the fireball like I did, this fireball is going to sometimes be a little bit of annoyance, but if you push the block and hook into it, you'll be protected by the fact that you're standing in a block, and then you can just move onward. You'll want to take this teleportation tile. Now, I generally assume most people know their way through GT in terms of what's where, but the mentor plays for newer players too, so I'm going to describe that pretty vividly. So, once you get into this room, and actually I'm going to talk about this, once the bomb hits a certain blinking state, if you watch the VOD for how I timed it later, basically if you set up a dash and then turn, you can just go through and you'll get through the door as soon as it's available without bombing yourself. Once you get into this room, just move up, dash onto this spot, hold right during the cutscene, so that way you cancel your dash immediately, and then dash north, and then start opening chests. You'll see people do the chests in different orders. It's not really too important, because you never know where that big key is going to be, and most of the time you're going to leave once you find it. Pushing the block up could be better in certain scenarios. I like to hook into it after pushing it left, and the reason I do that is because since I already kind of plan around taking damage anyway, so let's run by once again what I just did in this room. So once you teleport into this room, if you have the boots, you can just run south along the wall and you won't fall in. Now I will note, it's important, sometimes it's really easy to get in a move where you're holding forward, and you want to not do that, because if you do that, then you're against a pit and you cancel your dash. It's just a weird quirk of how the game works. So just do that, cancel your dash. I like to use diagonal inputs that are going with the flow of whatever I do to cancel a dash, because that way I still maintain a little bit of forward movement. Now for this, you want to kind of get where you're just like a little bit off, then do a dash turn. I'm too low. But if you do that, you'll bonk over. Now, worth keeping in mind is if you're in a situation where you know you're probably about to fight Ice Armos, and you need arrows, you don't have silvers, you just want to have extra in case. If you do go through here, you're going to lose a few seconds, but there's a pot with 5 arrows under it. It's very handy to know. Coming up into this room, this is a very easy room when you have the boots. There's also 5 arrows under this pot. Real quick, I'm going to point out, it is very rare you will ever have a situation where this even possibly matters, but GTBK chest, there it is. that's your way to get to it. In a typical like normal 7-7 seed, that's probably not coming up. Then bonk off that, and you're ready to just head up into the next room. However, before we do that, I want to address one other possibility. If you do not have the boots, you have multiple options. There's a path over here. You can reveal it with ether. And as you can see, you actually have to do a diagonal walk here, and that's not the best feeling. And you can see I don't know the path because I do this strat instead. As long as you have a bomb and health to spare, this is a really free bomb jump. Just hold out your sword against this pot, move one tile to the right, set your bomb. You can get a little closer, you don't have to strictly follow those methods, but that's a consistent method and it'll work. Yes, you can also reveal by lighting the torch. You'll have to be a little fast, but you can make it through that way. But when in doubt, the bomb jump is always going to be faster unless you will literally die executing it. Now in this room, you're seeing the anti-fairy bounce back and forth. A lot of times you'll see people powder this. You might want to do it as a safety, but if you don't have it, sorry, because I'm mid-sentence, I'm not thinking. Basically, there's a specific timing where if you're just wanting to have the anti-fairy not be in your way, you can pick it up, bounce. When it bounces there, pull the pot, it'll get out of your way. Get in, set your bomb, open your chest. It's the big key. You don't have to move on to Ice Armos. It's nice. Ice Armos. So, there's a lot to this fight, but frankly, this is the Mentor tournament, and I'm a little out of practice with this, so I'm just going to show you the easy strat. It's a little slower than optimal strats, but it's still good enough. So they start moving, shoot 1, 2, 3, turn left 1, 2, 3, wiggle a bit up and right so you don't lose your position, and then just fire north. It's possible you might lose a couple arrows if you're really hurting for resources. That can be a problem, but most of the time it won't. You go into this room, you open your remaining chests. So that's more or less the general idea for left side GT. There are some things where your loadout will cause minor changes, particularly if you have silvers. Your Ice Armos fight's going to be a lot freer, but that's more or less okay. So in this case, we did get the GTBK, and I want to talk about something here. When you get that GTBK, I want you to practice one thing. This should be on your mental checklist of things to do. You pull the GTBK out of the chest, I want your eye to be focused on how many small keys you have up here. You go look at that, because if that number is 0, you need to make sure that you get that resolved, or else you might end up climbing the tower and finding you have to go home. Okay, so for right side, this is the Hope Room. So typically what you're going to do is, most people will open the right chest first, and then the left chest. That way, you'll have the minimal amount of movement necessary after setting your Samaria block under that switch to go in. Tile Room. So Tile Room, there are different approaches you can take. If you have the Magic Cape, which, there we go. I recommend letting the Bunny Bean hit you first. It's not too overwhelming with the anti-fairy being on the right side of the room, and you're going to have to deal with it eventually anyway. So, you can wait this out. As you can see, these always fly at a consistent rhythm. It's never like random, so as long as you're paying attention, you just keep moving, it'll be okay. The hitboxes for the tiles don't spawn until they're actually flying in the air, so you don't have to worry about it. If you can, hit that with your sword just a little bit early, because otherwise you'll have to wait for that wall master to go away for the chest to spawn. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that if you have the cape on and you're grabbing a wall, your cape won't drain. So if that's all too much for you and you're just not feeling it, just put on the cape, grab the wall, and then once it's time, just let go and take it off. You know, I believe the door is generally safe from the tile. But then you're going to have to worry about the wall master. So I don't recommend using the door in this room. Moving on to Torch Room. There are different ways to approach this. What I like to do is I go into the room, and I fire rod this, I pick this up, I don't collect the magic, and then I run like this. I tank the damage intentionally, and just kind of let it happen. Throw that. So something worth noting here is when you throw that first block and set it off, if you are a little too fast on setting the second Samaria block, or depending on how things go with your menuing, you'll sometimes cancel part of the shot, and the Gibdo that likes to get in your way, it'll get a free pass to come bother you. When it happens, you're probably going to have to adjust a little bit. If you need to, there's a small magic here under this pot. I can help your resources a little bit. But you move on to the compass room. The main thing you need to know about the compass room is this one thing, and that's this. When you open this chest, this specific one, all of those pits are going to appear, so just in general, open that one last, unless you decide you have a good reason not to. Keep in mind, moving on to the right path, that there's going to be a key over here under the right pot. You see you have this jelly bothering me, that's fine, we're gonna pretend we drink a safety. So, you get a line here, and you move just like a little bit south, not too much, or you'll fall into the pit. You dash, that way you maintain speed and move past the stars. Otherwise, that's going to happen and you'll block yourself with a pit and fall. Now, if you don't have boots, or if you're just not feeling that strat for whatever reason, it's okay to walk. It's not the worst, but in that case, you'll want to make sure you do diagonal at the very end. That way you'll make it through without setting the pit to position. But if you do, then all you have to do is run and hit these stars, and you can set it, you get your key, you move on to the next room. Okay, so this room is generally not a room people like to do. It's it's a pain. So if you have invulnerability items and magic to spare, this isn't a problem. Just pull out the cape. We're gonna make a save state so I can come back easily. Just do that, you use a pretty minimal amount of magic. Now, this is almost never going to be relevant, but I am going to talk about passing into this next room. If you ever in a situation where it made sense for you to go full right in GT, and you don't have the boots, keep in mind just one little thing. The intended way to do this room is to deal with the statue. You could also use a bomb jump if you had the health to spare. Don't feel like dealing with it. You can deal with this enemy however you like. You're probably going to want to hit it at some point, just so it doesn't bother you. But if you have the boots, you can just bonk. And if not, then you'll need to press the star, at which point you can get in normally. A little path will appear, it'll be fine. This room has nothing of consequence to it. You can just dash, and you'll make it through. But as you pass into this room, there's something to keep in mind, and that's if you don't have the boots and you came this way, this is going to be annoying. It's going to hit you if you don't get out of the way, so just keep that in mind, because it's always misaligned. It's never perfectly here or perfectly there. If you had the boots, then you just bonk over it, so no problem. So that's about it for right side GT. Now let's talk about routing a little bit. So this is the wrong place. Whoops. Okay, so entrance. So you've just made it to GT, and you're trying to decide which way you want to go. I will say, based on past experience, I will see a lot of people generally go like this, where they go to this room for the 2 quick checks, and then they go with a flowchart, where if you get a small key, you just continue going right, usually skipping tile room. Most of the time you're always going to just skip tile room and hope it's not there, so otherwise you spend a lot of time. Tile room is more of a desperation gamble, where you feel like you've already lost anyway. So in general, that's your time for tile. Now in this case, because we're dealing with the energy item pool, we didn't get a small key, and we go left. So once again, you just go through the motions, try to deal with each room and its challenges as efficiently as possible. And if you practice this enough, it'll all become second nature. You can see there, by doing a dash turn, I was able to avoid the bonk. Sword beams always annoy me, and I try not to have them when I get to GT, because of this room. Now there's one way to do that. You get your 4 chests in here, You didn't find the big key, but now you have small keys. If you have already done the Hope Room, the room with 2 chests, I don't recommend changing course. I recommend just staying on the left side. However, it is perfectly valid. In fact, I prefer to do it more often than not. Come over here, get the torch in your 4 in here first, then mirror, and then go do the full right play up to the compass room. The benefit of doing that, essentially, is that if it's on the right side, then you'll get ahead of people who took the other path, assuming that there was no small key in this room, which, you know, sometimes is very good. The potential downside is, of course, if it's not here, then the other path is just going to be more efficient, either way. Yeah, I will say the usual determiner for whether or not to proceed right after Hope Room is just whether or not you get a key or not. There are people who have certain superstitions that if you, say, do Rando Room and you find all 4 of the wild GT small keys, you know, that's a sign you should go right away. And while sometimes that will be correct, that's really just coincidence more than anything. There's really no absolute 100% way to metagame what keys you find in GT. So just pick a route that you think you'll be happy with, and it'll be okay. But in general, that's what you gotta keep in mind. Either start with this room, follow a key right, and then go left. Start with this room, go left anyway. Or go left over to DM's room, and then mirror and go right. Another alternative is if you've gone to DM's room, done that, mirrored, gone right, and not found it, some people like to sometimes proceed along the right path along the way to Ice Arms. If that works for you, if that's what you like, by all means feel free to try, but do know that that is sometimes a bit more high risk. The right side GT bomb jump. So, to tell the truth, that was on my list of things that I did not consider to be high priority, but I certainly will address it. Alright, we'll just go back to entrance. I'm gonna have to get a key. Actually, I can just give myself a key. Hold on. There we go. That's cheating. You shouldn't do that. So there is in this situation where you can use special bomb jump or hover if you're feeling it, if that's your specialization. And that's this room. If you don't have the fire rod, but the GTBK is over here, then you either go look for the fire rod, or you first head up here, clear out all the enemies however you feel best with. This room is honestly part of the reason why I don't particularly prefer having to do this. So the reason you do that is because you're going to essentially do a setup where you're going to light the torch in the most annoying spot in the room first, and then you're going to immediately fall into the pit. That will take you up here, and then you can light all the torches with the lamp in sequence. It's also very important, you need to make sure that your block setup is correct in advance, because every second is going to count. Alright, so first thing, after you've cleared out all the enemies, you'll want to kind of hug the bottom here, and you want to make sure that you're on the most extreme edge of the pit. Then kind of do this, then time that as best as you can. I didn't quite get it. Unfortunately, I don't remember the exact spot right now. but I will link a tutorial independent of this so that those of you who want to have this in your toolkit can learn it. But what's going to happen after that is you'll light the first torch with your lamp, you'll fall, you'll be set here, you're going to have your lamp out, just going to book it. You can still do this without the boots, but you have to use hook and it's a lot tighter. And then you pretend the door open, like I hit the first torch, go through. Additionally, I realized before I move on to the next part of GT, one, if there are any additional questions, now would be a good time for them. Oh wait, what am I doing? I had the real fire on. We're gonna wait until these torches go. Yeah, it can be a big time save in niche scenarios, but most of the time it's not going to happen. So you're either going to need the fire rod before you can even get to this point, or you just happen to find the fire rod anyway. But it's still worth knowing. It shouldn't be your highest priority. Focus on being good at the rest of this lesson first. I need another key. So I want to talk about this following room. I meant to teach the setup for if you ever feel like you have to go here and you don't have an invulnerability item. Essentially, you're going to do some really tight inputs. You're going to walk in here, and you're going to basically be holding down and right initially, and you're going to do a setup that takes exactly 3 damage. It can do 4 if you're slipping, but as long as you can tank that much, you can make it through. So you dodge fire snake, get through, hug the wall. Why didn't that work? That was weird. Excuse me. Head in, get position, dodge fire snake, hug the wall, hold against the pit. You know what? It isn't working today. No, we're gonna get this. It's okay. Wait. Let hit you. And then don't do what I just did. I had to apologize. For whatever reason, my setup isn't working today. And I just feel that we can do more constructive things than sit here and figure out what went wrong. But it's okay, because most of the time, it's not worth it for you to go full right in GT in a normal seed. This is more of a cross keys entrance shuffle early GT type situation, where you might be forced to do this. Still pretty rare, though. Okay, I seem to have messed up the practice hack, and I no longer have a character sprite, so let's fix that first. We're going to drop in again and die again and see if that helps. Oh, I guess just dropping in again in general fix that. So there you go, if you lose your character sprite in the practice hack, just drop into the Ganon fight and you'll be fine. Alright, so in general, the main thing that I want you to keep in mind, in addition to when you get that big key, look at your key count. Just make that second nature, but essentially most of the time, you're not going to have to worry too much about what different items are making you do here, aside from, do you throw the boomerang, or do you use Samaria for that one crystal switch over here? Or over here, the reverse scenario where you just don't have the fire rod, you want to do that bomb jump. Up here, especially with quick swap, your item layout, your resources, these are going to matter a lot more. So I'm going to be talking a lot about each little thing. So first off, I'm gonna set my health down a bit because, as I talked about, I tend to just intentionally take a lot of damage for the sake of speed. You might notice that it was actually kind of a lot with the hits and DMs room I take, but that's also why I tend to do the DM mirror strats, is because that way you don't have to fight the Stalfos. That's why I like it. So, generally you're going to want to have your bow out first. When you come out here, turn left and immediately fire an arrow. Move south, walk onto the spikes, press A and dash. If you do that right, you'll make it over just taking 2 hearts of damage. You can pick that up if you need extra magic. There are a couple other magic spots in there, but that's the most convenient one. But if you follow that path, that's a real nice, easy way through the room. So Mimics 1. I'm going to be talking first about silverless strats. I like to grab the wall. Some people will do this where they slash the sword because you can still manipulate mimics while your sword's slashing. That works. But I like to grab the wall and move them into position. It just works for me a little better because otherwise I get uncoordinated. That's just me. Feel free to do that however works best for you. Get them into position, hold out your sword and move horizontal, and just fire until they're dead. Obviously, you want to save every arrow you can if you're in a situation where management matters, and you also want to watch the spike, because depending on how the mimics overlap, you can end up firing into the spike, and if that happens, then you just wasted an arrow. So just be mindful of what you're doing. Okay, so this room, Mimics 2, is considerably more annoying. There are different ways to handle this. The way I prefer to handle it is I move right. I don't actually pause buffer this in real time, obviously, but I'm just trying to give an example. Face up, fire, move the mimic into it. Face up, fire, move the mimic into it. Ideally, you'll not get shot by the Beamos in a real run. And then you just kind of do the same thing along the path. Now, the Beamos, once again, they can absorb your arrows, so you want to make sure that mimics that you're aiming at aren't interacting with them. But that's a nice fast strat when done correctly. Now that I've described that, I'm going to try attempting it in real time. You can see that's not a world record for that room by any means, but that was a nice clean strat and it worked well. That's the one I prefer to do. Another one you can do if you're wanting a little more safety. Set yourself up. You've just cleared Mimics 1. You're going to hold your sword out. You move up, fire left twice. Unfortunately, your sword being out, that's going to create some lag. Once that Beamos fires, you let it clear, then you just move south, fire twice, you're good to go. Release your sword spin, get out of the room. So that's a nice, very safe way to do that. I do acknowledge that there are faster strats than the one that I prefer to use for Mimics 2, it's just that works best for my particular... I've mentioned already in Mimics 1 that manipulating Mimics is something that just doesn't work in my brain sometimes. So, now let's... Actually, I need to do Mimics 1 for this first. Sometimes you're going to be blessed, and you'll have the silvers, at which point this is real easy. So Mimics 1 probably isn't going to be very different, but I'm going to show an alternative setup. If you walk south, hug the wall, fire right as you go along, do that. If you're ever in a situation where manipulating the mimics is tricky for you, like it is me, that's about a second slower than perfect manipulation of the mimics. And that's a silvers only strat. Do not do that with wooden arrows or you will lose so much time. Next room, just go in, fire north, fire south, you're done. Silvers make life so much better, and that's why we weren't allowed to have them in the main tournament. Okay, so moving on. You enter this room after clearing out your mimics. If you have... Well, if you don't have the boots, all you have to do is walk north. Nothing interesting, but if you had the boots, don't move during the screen transition. As soon as the screen transitions, just charge a dash. You'll key dash. You don't have to do anything to set it up, just dash. Going into this room, you want to go to the right for clearance, pick up your pot, and then kind of dash south. Sometimes you're going to get hit by that spike, and sometimes if you do everything and everything just lines up perfectly, you'll make it through without getting hit. That feels great when that happens. But otherwise, no matter what happens, just head up, do that, and then get to the next room. I'm going to go through that again, just for the sake of showing things more than once. Spike run. Oh, I guess this is the spike run. So yeah, we'll go through that one more time. I move over to the right, do a dash, hit the crystal switch, dash north, dash south. I got hit both times. But that's okay. You want to be in a situation where you're willing to tank one heart of damage here. Now if you don't have boots, or you're in a situation where you don't feel comfortable taking a heart of damage, you don't magically warp to Ganon, that's not going to happen. But a nice safe way to do this is walk up, hit your switch, get this, wait out the Mimic cycle, or Igor rather, and then just kind of edge your way down, paying attention to where those are. Not as comfy, but you'll make it through. So then just get up on out of the room. So there is, in NMG, you'll see a very specific setup sometimes runners do that enables them to dash through this room. And I'm going to say, this is randomizer where there's so much else going on that I never bothered to learn how to do that. So please watch an NMG tutorial if you want to learn that trick. If you're walking through, obviously you just got to pay attention, be mindful of where the cannonballs are. You'll make it through every time. Or if you don't, well, you're going to take a harder damage, but you'll at least have some iframes to ensure that things are going well. Now, there are other ways to handle this. Anyway, you go into the room. Sometimes you'll see people, they choose to take a fall so that they can just dash through after that. I don't really care to do this, but it's a legitimate tactic. Another thing you can do, and this is especially great with Quick Swap, is if you have magic to burn, either because of excess safeties, or you just have half magic and you're feeling good about it, what you can do is if you have Cape or Burna, I'm going to give myself both so I can show those each in turn. You get Cape, you come to the room, you do an item dash, you cancel it. It's very important that you cancel it first, and then just hit either your Quick Swap buttons to move off of it. You'll preserve as much of your magic as possible, and you'll make it through nice and fast. That's one of those spots where Quick Swap is a real game changer, because otherwise it would be too slow to menu. Same for Burna. You just do yourself a Burna dash, cancel it by canceling your dash, and then you just turn off Burna at your leisure. So here, you can either bonk across, or you get the freest bomb jump in the game, because all you have to do is just align yourself with the tiles and knock yourself over. You have more bombs, which we're going to need. And you just set yourself that. And you have this nice room with 2 fairies. You get a bomb, you get a full magic right there. Nothing else of note under those pots, so don't bother with them. And that's kind of nice. It's a little bit of a time cost, but if you're feeling like things aren't going great for you, that's a good way to maybe turn things around. And one more thing I want to address is if you're going to do the safety room, you come over here, you want to make sure that you don't throw your bomb poorly. Because a lot of times you'll want to throw your bomb first so you don't have to sit around waiting for it to go. But if you don't throw it right, you see it bounced. So you want to just make sure you're like there, and that way it won't bounce. That probably won't matter a whole lot unless you're on your last bomb, but just be mindful of it. So now I'm going to move into the Gauntlet. A lot of times, if you're still in the condition where you're taking the safety door, you're going to be at full health, and the downside to that is that you're going to have sword beams, which is going to make the next room a little annoying, but it's not the end of the world. So there's a lot to say about the Gauntlet, so we're going to go through this repeatedly. Immediately, you want to have your bow out if you can. You're going to move left, face south, and fire into the Stalfos. That way, you immediately eliminate an enemy. You only spend 1 arrow. Obviously, you won't do that if you're in a situation where you absolutely must conserve arrows for something more important. That'll be fine. Move into this, throw the pot right, and then just react to these Stalfos accordingly. There's a lot of RNG going on here, so you're not always going to get the ideal setup. I like to fire an arrow south about there, and then if you do a dash in that position, you'll get over here, so that way if you get bad RNG and the enemy walks north, you'll already be over this way, and can get it immediately. Now, there is the downside that if you don't time that right, you'll dash into the spike. So just kind of clear out the room, throw on cape with, like, I don't know, turn on, like, cape and half magic, and just practice this dash time, because you see that wasn't right, but this would be. Not quite. Yeah, there we go. So, when in doubt, be a little more south than you feel like you have to be, because that's not too bad. These BMOs are annoying, but if you kill the enemies quickly enough, they won't be a problem. Move into this room. Generally, you're going to want to dash south immediately, and then just react accordingly. Sometimes that enemy is going to be sneaky. It's going to run past you without you even getting a chance to dash into it. And frankly, it sucks when that happens. But, you know, then it's just the breaks of this game. Moving into this room, what I like to do is if I have magic to spare, which I consider myself to have magic to spare, if by this point, if I have one more fire rod shot than half a magic meter without half magic. So you move diagonally to the left just a little bit, fire your fire rod, then use sword slashes to get yourself into position, kill this enemy, be mindful of the Demos, don't get yourself in a combo lock there. Then we move on into Lanmo 2. So, if you watched Stanty's boss tutorial last night for Lanmo 2, if you're using the Fire Rod, you're probably going to just use the same strats as he ideally taught you there. Silver's setup, however, for this room is a little bit different. And the reason for that is because of that fire shooter in the bottom left corner. And so I'm going to teach you the Silver's setup for this room. Once I give myself the silvers. I'm having a moment. Okay. So with silvers, the main thing you've got to keep in mind is you're going to, using my setup, you're going to stand a little bit to the south of the marker for where the rightmost Lanmo is going to come up. And when that happens, what you're going to do is you're going to wait for the fireball to get shot, and then you're going to move a little bit left, a little bit up, turn, and then fire into the Lanmo 1, and then just kind of follow the rhythm, face south, very tiny wait, fire again, turn and fire again. And if you do all that correctly, it should go. You see? Oh. I'm sorry, I said face south, but the south one is actually last. It just shows how sometimes your muscle memory is piloting more than you are. Well, we'll do that again. This time without the preamble. Something that you might have noticed on that last shot is that you don't actually have to hit a Lanmo as it spawns with the very tip of the arrow. If the hitbox of the arrow overall is overlapping with the hitbox of the Lanmo, then that'll count as a hit. So don't worry about realistic arrow physics in your Zelda game tonight. Now, something I had to address because it did happen here, just due to me loading that room in the practice hack. When you spend time in this room, Lanmo's spawn cycle will begin. So the more time you spend in here, the more it's going to happen. I'm going to show that by loading the preset. Okay, this time we're just going to wait it out. By the way, if you have powder, great chance to get a safety there. You can get a fairy, get a health refill if you feel like you need it. And, you know, my advice to you is if you ever feel like you need a refill, just take it, because it can be unfortunate to lose for a few seconds because you were a little extra careful, but it feels so much worse to lose by a small margin or even a somewhat larger one when you were ahead and you didn't get yourself that little extra boost of confidence and everything went south. So this time we spent quite a bit of time waiting. And so you'll see all three of these are now going to pop out and be synced up. And we're going to do this, and I'm going to do it wrong. Yeah, that's okay. There's a Samaria setup you can do. It's really specific though, and I'm not qualified to teach it. Apologies. So let's move on just a little bit. We're going to cover the basics of these rooms, and I'll talk about them in a little more detail. Well, Lanmo 2, obviously, we already covered. I'm not going back there. These rooms, it's important to just know there are little refills you can get here. It's small magic, 5 arrows, you can get a bomb, or a heart. So just make sure. In general, you're going to take the small magic more often than not. There are times where you'll just have so much left over just due to luck or whatever, or half magic that you don't care. But you want to make sure that you don't mismanage your magic. So let's head up the stairs. Go up here. This is an easy quick kill. Just move south a little bit. Fire. And go. If you don't have the Cane of Samaria, you're going to have to do other stuff. Essentially, you're just going to want to consult your knowledge about what works on Wizrobes and do whatever you're comfortable with. There's no longer exactly what I would call a quick kill. I'm sure there are faster strats, but most of the time you're going to have the Cane of Samaria. That's what you need to know. Move south. Whether or not to cancel the stair lag there is up to you. I prefer not to cancel the stair lag because I don't trust myself. Honest admissions, I don't trust myself to not somehow get out of position or misfire the Samaria block. You don't want that. But it's okay. Just do what feels best for you with regards to that. So this room, you're just going to head south, and then you'll dash across. A small portion of the time, you might get really unlucky with how those guards are positioned. One of them could bump you out of your dash. Just make sure, if you're going to do that, if you're uncomfortable, that your current heart count reflects the possibility of you getting knocked into the pit or something. If you're not sure, you can pull out your hook shot, or just whatever feels comfortable for you. You can take the walking path and just kind of stun bump things and then move on through. These eyes, as long as you are paying active attention to the game, which you should be, they probably won't be a problem in most scenarios. Okay, so moving on to Wizrobes 2. What you're going to do is you're going to move into Wizrobes 2, and you're going to kind of move up a little bit, and then you're going to face left, you're going to set a Samaria block, and then you're going to fire it. If things go ideally, you'll hit 3 of them, and then you can just whack the 4th with your sword. So let's see how that looks. So that was how that went well. There are things that can go wrong there. And we're going to pop into Wizrobes 2 again. So the thing that can go wrong, you move too far north. You get hit by the spike. That's no good. Hesitate, just keep that in mind. Something else that can happen is if you wait, if I had hesitated a little more on the fire there, it's possible that the Samaria block could have gone too far north and it would have hit the spike instead of the right Wizrobe. But as long as you move a little bit north, set your block, do that, most of the time it'll go fine. As always, practice makes perfect. Or at least good enough. So this room with the bridge. When you have the boots, what I like to do is move right a little bit and then dash north. The reason I do that instead of just a cold dash north is I have the personal opinion, it may be confirmation bias, but it seems like sometimes you'll go into this room and you do a dash without getting into position first, and then sometimes one of those guards loves to just hold their weapon south and you'll bonk right into it. That can happen from any position, but it feels a little more common if you don't position yourself. What you don't want to do is walk up this one, because you can see that's slow. If you have no boots, obviously you can't dash through, so you're going to have to improvise a little bit. I recommend using the hook and just kind of stunning enemies and making your way through. Otherwise, another thing you can do is just kind of... This is going to be fast as far as walking goes, so you can just kind of walk north and kind of hope nothing notices you. Just once again, be mindful of your health and select strats that aren't going to result in your death. If you're not in a position where you're going to die from a couple hits, then be less worried about it. But just be cautious, because this is a big time loss if you do happen to take a death. Okay, so this room, we're going to refill our magic, because I used a little extra, just kind of showing stuff again and again. But there are different ways to approach this. If you have a lot of extra magic, at least 4 fire rod shots, or rather, I guess just 3 fire rod shots, what you can do is you come along here, pick the pot, fire right, hug that, you'll get knocked north as long as you're in position correctly, and then you can just go along, fire north, and you'll make it through. With that last pot, this last skull pot, has this. So if you have 3 shots, you can do the first 3 shots, pick up the skull pot, fire north, and then get through the door. Now, we've already discussed what's going to happen in the rare scenario where you do a seed where you have no fire rod. So let's talk about that a little bit. This is Torches 2. Wrong room. So you go into this room, and you don't have the fire rod, you have the lamp. You're going to want to take a little more time to set up. Pick up the skull pot first. That's my preference. You do that. You're also learning now. There's a moment here where you can just get an extra bit of magic. So that's roughly a quarter bar, or rather exactly a quarter bar between the two refills you have here. So essentially, whatever you're doing, if you have no lamp and you're forced to use fire rod, you need to make sure that you have at least 2 shots going into the room, and then you get both your refills. But otherwise, it'll be okay. Most of the time, you'll have the lamp. As long as you had the lamp, magic management's not an issue anyway. But you get this through, and then around that point, do this. When you're lamping this, I recommend just kind of doing everything in turn. See, that was actually too slow because I bonked. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. And I remembered you want to do it like that. Move from 6 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And then all will be well. Now, if you don't have the boots, you're probably going to want to just take the time to make sure you use the hook shot to cross those pots. There's a small magic here, but we're going to reset this room and talk about that in a little more detail. So for this room, when you get in here, you want your safeties, right? You can have a heart, and you can have a full magic refill. And you should never, ever, 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 ever get shot by this laser as long as you're doing it right. Because you see what I did? We're going to show you again. As long as you're aligned pixel-wise with the pot, pick it up, and you just don't move, and the thing will automatically collect. No further risk needed. Get up the stairs. Now, I'm going to do Torches 1 again so I can talk a little bit about the timing, because there's the despawn glitch to be mindful of. We're going to do Lamp Strat again, just because why not? So you make it through, and essentially the amount of time that you have to get through this room is always going to be the same. When you're doing the lamp strat, it's going to be a slow-going thing, so you're probably not going to have extra time to make it up the stairs at all, like happened here. So once again, we'll do Torches 1, this time with the fire rod and a full bar of magic, so I can just book it. I was about to give myself the fire rod, a thing that the game already knows I have. I'm going to show you how much time you have, roughly. So everything went ideally. You can even move into this room, rush forth, get your magic refill, head upstairs. I actually had several seconds left. People like to say that I'm risking a despawn when I do that, but you're really not. You have plenty of time. As long as you get through it extra fast like that. You'll eventually get used to around how much time you have, and then you know whether you can risk it or not. But most of the time, if everything went well, if everything went according to plan, then, you know, even with getting the magic refill, you don't have to worry about a despawn. I had probably at least 3 seconds left. If it's closer though, keep in mind that you just, if you're not feeling it, just wait it out until you hear the chime, because otherwise if you go onto these stairs at the same frame, it will despawn everything in the dungeon. You'll have to mirror. But if you have a good sense for what's going on and everything went well with your strats, if it's lamp strats, you were either too slow for it to matter, or fire rod strats, you were so fast that you're going to be ahead of it. So this room, you can check these chests if you want for extra things. There's a bomb under here if you need it, which, you know, you're going to need at least 1 bomb. You can get a bomb here. Once again, I'm going to load this up. Helmet key. A good way to do this, assuming you're not checking anything extra, or don't need the resources, is you go up into the room, hook left into the pot, pick it up, bait these over, throw, sword slash. That kills them both for sure, and that way you don't have to worry about which one has the key, and you'll be right by the door. So, once again, I'm just going to go through the motions again so you can see it one more time. So again, you're going to want to have your hook out, go through the door, immediate hook left, pick up pot, bait over, throw and slash. Easy. Go into this room. The main thing you want to keep in mind is it is possible, much like with the previous thing, if you are on the wrong pixel, you'll throw your bomb and it won't be moved by the conveyor belt. I'm going to see if I can do that on purpose. No. No. But essentially, coming into this room, what you actually want to do to make sure it doesn't happen is just set your bomb, pick it up, tap down, throw. You're fine. If you do that really efficiently, then you'll have time to get into position so as not to bother with the spike. Now this room, if you have everything you need, if you don't feel like you need to open this chest, then the only things you really need to know are that this has a heart, and that this has your full magic. In general, you are going to want to take this. If you feel like there's any conceivable reason why you might want to take that, please just do it. Okay, so now let's talk about that room. If you're going to get the chest, there are different ways to set it up, but I tend to be just extra lazy about it, so I'm going to teach my lazy strat. Get into the room, wait here, I pick up this pot, I walk south. Once the bunny beam goes away, I just move right, grab the chest. That also gets me my magic, and by moving right and throwing as I do that, I'm just out of the way. That way the anti-fairy doesn't get me, and it just ensures that the bunny beam doesn't get me either. That all works out well. I get the chest, I get both of the safeties, everything is good. So if you just kind of put that into practice, I don't recommend doing that if you don't intend to open the chest, but in general that's a perfectly fine way to do it. So Lanmo 2, let's talk about Lanmo 2, or Moldorm 2 rather. I know the names of bosses. So you head into the room, you jump down, you've watched Dante's boss tutorial, I'm sure it's very good for Moldorm 2, and you're just going to have a very normal Moldorm fight. Based on what damaging tools you have, you'll have to adjust accordingly, but this is really just the normal fight with a slightly different shaped arena. It is very unlikely, actually, no, under these settings, under this flag set, you will at least have the hammer. So the main thing I would recommend practicing here is just make sure you're comfortable fighting Moldorm with the hammer, so that on the off chance, I hope it doesn't happen to you, that you are in a situation where you're still on the fighter's sword and you have to go look for a sword elsewhere, if this next chest doesn't contain a sword. Just know how to use your hammer so that you don't have to do the energy strats and deal with Moldorms and rage. Alright, so, I'm actually going to kill Moldorm 2 again because there's something else I want to talk about. It's a little thing, but it'll save you just a tiny chunk of time if you get used to doing it right. So ideally, most of the time, you're going to have your hook shot out at the moment Moldorm 2 dies, since you can't menu or quick swap while a boss is exploding. Just go ahead and get your kill. If you're lucky, Moldorm will kind of move horizontally here and you can just dash. That didn't work because I wasn't actually primed to do it. But what we're going to do here, when Moldorm's sprite disappears, hook. And that way, you'll just catch the chest as soon as it spawns. It's really good, convenient that way. You open your chest, we didn't get silvers, that's okay. Hook through this block. You can try to tap left as you're dashing into this, but if you don't do it with the exact timing, you'll bonk. So you can either cancel your dash and walk through the door, or if you do get that, and get that nice little thing, you'll just kind of clip and dash into the door. Now one other thing I want to address is if you're in a situation where you don't have the hook shot, you're going to have to either hover or Moldorm bounce. I'm not qualified to teach Moldorm bounce because my attitude about Moldorm bounce, my personal attitude, is that if I am in a situation where the correct winning play is to Moldorm bounce, then I'm going to say GG and take the loss. Because I just, it's too much for me, you know? But as a result, if you feel like that's worth it to learn, then go for it, but that shouldn't be your priority. I'm not going to teach hovering here, because frankly I'm somewhat inconsistent at it. and I'm not really the qualified hover teacher, but in general, if you fall to Moldorm, you're going to fall into the spike room. Up here in the upper right is your way out. As long as you're moving quickly, these Wiz Rogues won't even get a chance to spawn. If for any reason your health is an issue, you can use powder to get the anti-fairy that's down here every time. Now, if you are in a situation where you're trying to hover and you're not getting it the first couple tries, something you want to keep in mind is you go into this room, and ideally you want to start your hover from here, so that way when you fall, you land on a safe spot. If you're over here on the left and you don't get a clean start to your hover, you're going to land here on these spikes. You don't want that, because that adds up. And that more or less concludes what I wanted to say about Moldorm 2. That said, we gotta cover the room after Moldorm 2, which unfortunately there was a save state for, so we'll be killing Moldorm 2 one more time to get across the pit. I didn't listen to my own advice there. That's very good. You can tell I retired. I haven't played this in randomized form in over a month. So if you come into this room, you can kind of move here, and as long as you have the hook, which you usually should, you just bonk that enemy, and then that also kind of sets you up to have the timing where you just dash north. If you're doing that without the boots, it gets a little more annoying. But there are different strategies. You can pull out your invincibility items, you can just use the hook to stun the ones that do get in your way, but in general, this isn't going to be a big problem. The only time this room is ever a major issue is if you're just tilted and not paying attention to these bouncies, because as long as they're not in a position to be in your way, they're fine. Even when you're walking through, because walking is generally going to be okay. But you make it through, and then we move on to the Aga 2 fight. But before I go in there, we have one other thing I want to go cover, and that's alternative setups depending on resources for the Gauntlet. So I've mentioned before, you know, a lot of times you're going to have things like the Tempered Sword. It's going to be nice, but sometimes you might have, say, Master Sword, and then you just didn't get lucky. You also... you don't have half magic, you want to hold off on your potion for whatever reason, that's okay. Especially if you're on Master Sword and you're playing on Master Sword again, you probably just want to keep what you have. So in that case, you're going to have to deal with everything being a little more annoying. The Stoffos aren't going to be more durable, but these are going to take 2 hits all of a sudden. This room hasn't changed much. Pick up the pot, and then you just deal with the RNG as it comes. You can use arrows if you feel like you have a good lineup. Stoffos will always telegraph their movement. See, unfortunately I didn't get that dash, but I also didn't get bad RNG here. This room's kind of annoying. You can set up spins, or if you get really fortunate with your positioning, this enemy normally takes 2 hits from Master Sword, but if you're lucky, you can just knock them into the spikes, and then it's no longer a problem. If you don't have Fire Rod shots to spare, you can use an arrow there. Sometimes the Stoffos will walk past it, you'll have to just adjust and hit it with your sword eventually, but, you know, no worries. So that was actually really bad RNG on that third room, but it happens. But that's kind of why I stress, if you feel you need safeties, you bring, because things can and do go wrong. It's okay. So, once again, kind of addressing a Gauntlet scenario. If you have half magic, or you have safeties in abundance and you're willing to burn them, you can have things go a lot better. We'll actually go to Gauntlet 1 for this. Because I realize I've talked about how things go averagely or when you don't have good gear, but let's talk about when you do. We're going to pretend I have half magic here. But we'll also pretend I fired an arrow there, because you still should just use the arrow to save a little bit of magic. Get through the first room, you still pick up and throw this pot, fire south. If you're really lucky, that leftmost Stoffos will get over, and it'll get hit by the splash damage from the fire rod, and they'll both die at once. Really cool. This is also easier to aim than a wooden arrow. I say as I miss. It happens, sometimes you're just unlucky. Speaking of which, this is really unlucky, having to take the loop around. But you can either, if you have fire rod shots to spare and enemies get up there, you can just fire up at them. It's great. Same is true for this room. Fortunately, we got an ideal setup, and then we just had to stall us. Once again, little bits of damage, they're okay. Sometimes everything goes great and you don't take any damage at all, it's fun. Alright, Aga 2. So the thing you need to know about Aga 2 is that, well, it's really got a lot of randomness to it. For the most part, the main thing you're going to gain out of practicing is getting used to how your different sword moves are going to interact with the balls that are shot at you. Obviously, you won't have cutscene text to mash through in Randomizer, so this was not a great starting position, because these are going to come from the corner of the room at the same time that I'm being fired at from the left side, and so I'm probably not going to be able to get a lot of great shots here. So what I can do is charge a sword spin and just kind of try to get a little something, which I didn't. This, you can't take contact damage from the Aga Ghosts, so keep that in mind. Though as soon as they fire at you, those shots will hurt you, so just be mindful. Something you'll see here is that you're going to get slightly different angles based on where you are and how you do that. You just kind of got to feel this out. There's no, unfortunately, there's no simple magic trick to it. A lot of times in Randomizer versus NMG, you'll see people use these spins because they're consistent. Essentially, the timing on spins is tight, and you can't get shot in the back while you're sword spinning. Actually, we're going to stand outside the boss room. I'm going to talk about that. This is something that, if you've played a lot, should be obvious to you by now, but if you're newer, or somehow never noticed, when you do your spin attack, you see that little animation, and you might think, you know, okay, so I have to be mindful of that, but it's actually just a ring AoE that's active for the entire time the spin slash is active. So you don't have to think about that at all. And that's also nice because you can use that to protect yourself in this fight. So that's why you see a lot of runners in Rando using that a lot. However, doing slashes also has its advantages in that you get out of a slash faster, and therefore you have a little more fine control. So both sides have their advantages and disadvantages. Knowing when you slash or spin slash is essentially just something you kind of have to work on. I'm going to keep Aga 2 brief here, so we can move on to Ganon, because Ganon is, I feel, a lot more important. Aga 2, even if you have a slow fight, you're probably not going to die up here unless things get really out of hand, or you just came in with like 1 or 2 health in the first place, and we're unlucky. Speaking of which, one last note about Aga 2, the blue balls. The ghosts will never shoot blue balls out, so please don't think that can happen. Aga, whether he does it or not, is random, so don't worry about it too much. So first thing, especially in the setting of the Mentor Tournament, that I want you to keep in mind going into your Ganon fight, is just know what safeties you have. Also know how much health you currently have. These are things that you can look at for free, more or less, with Quick Swap. There are just times you're going to be able to check, so just try to be aware of those things. So let's try to imagine the scenario that you are one hit from death. Just GT was a little rough. You got through it okay in time, but you're just hurt for health, and you're just feeling nervous about the Ganon fight, but you feel ahead for whatever reason. It's okay, if you're in that scenario, to just drop into the Ganon fight and immediately just walk into him. So then you'll get a health refill, you heal. It's okay. Probably you're not going to want to prefer to do that, but especially if you're doing a Master Sword fight, that can be a lot of help. So another thing I want to address before I start focusing on the actual meat of the Ganon fight is another reason to do that death. a lot of time I've seen people who are a little less comfortable with Master Sword Ganon have a seed where they are in the position needing to do it. So they go and get their potions, their safeties. Speaking of safeties, I am going to show one here because it's local. If you come down here, you can bonk that tree, there's a fairy for you. But the thing you want to keep in mind is if you just bought a bunch of potions and you don't have money to replace them, what you want to do there is you want to drop into Ganon, immediately intentionally die, and save and continue. That way, if you happen to go through a Ganon fight where you're giving your best at the MS Silverless or whatever, and you burn all your potions, but unfortunately you lost, you immediately save scum your potions. You reset the game. That way you don't have to go grind for cash or figure out an emergency solution. All that's going to cost you is the extra time traveling to the pyramid again. Similarly, if you have a situation where you use one potion but you feel like you can continue because you have the rest of a full stock, let's talk about that again. We're going to die real fast with turbo function. Or not, because I activated the text. Good job. This last option on the bottom, it's going to be in English when you play a randomizer run, but you're going to not save and you're going to continue anyway. That way, you can preserve your potions to the emergency scenario that you need to save scum, and get your potions back, you can. Once again, in general, if you feel like you can win your Ganon fight, if you're not feeling nervous, then don't worry about all that. That's just for situations where you're trying to overcome a wall that you maybe felt like you weren't fully ready for yet. But I've seen a lot of runners struggle with not doing that thing, and I've always wanted to say it, but at the moment I can't tell them because one, that's backseating and rude, but also it's giving someone advice while they're playing. That's not allowed. Forbidden. But this isn't a race. I can finally say it. Okay, so let's talk about the Ganon fight. We're going to cover Phase 1 and Phase 2 twice. Once with Tempered, and then once with Master. So first, Tempered. Get in, immediately try to get in 2 swings. Now, when this text box pops up, I want you to look at the shadow on your sprite. You see the line on the grid that my shadow is slightly above? Well, if it is touching that and is fully above it or completely perfectly aligned with it, then the sword swing that I'm doing is going to hit when the text box goes off. If it's below that line, even just a little, then I'm going to miss. You need to make sure to adjust, because if you miss and you're holding up to be ready for the knockback from the sword swing, you're going to walk into Ganon and you're probably going to die. So just be mindful of what's going on. You have to mash through this text anyway, so just use that as an opportunity to know what's about to happen in your run. Get a third swing in, and then time that spin about like that. So Ganon can teleport south to 4 positions during this phase. With what we're about to do, we're going to end Phase 1 without him doing another cycle where he will spin the trident. I will do a less efficient one to show what that looks like and how to deal with that in a moment, but for now, we're going to talk about sort of the ideal case scenario. So far, this has gone the way I wanted it to. And now we're going to move in. The spin slash is going to hit Ganon twice since he's up against the south wall. And then I'm going to get one more sword spin in. Based on everything I've done so far, that's going to be all the damage for Phase 1. He's going to start Phase 2. Okay, so Phase 1 is dead. So the next thing I need to do is I'm facing left and I'm going to charge a sword spin. Now unfortunately, because I'm talking and doing all these pauses, I kind of missed the timing on that. But in a real run, I would make that my first priority. But this is okay. We're just going to pretend that didn't happen. You do your sword spin, and then you get in the circle before all the bats spawn in. They're going to spawn in a way that, as long as you do the timing correctly, you'll be safe to walk in. Then what you're going to do is you're just going to dash in again and repeatedly. As long as you don't cancel the dash early, Ganon can't contact damage you while he's invulnerable. Now we're going to go through all that again. One, two. You only need 2 dashes there. Get 2 more sword spins while the circle's wide. 1, 2. That's your full phase 2 damage. The fire bats here, they can be intimidating, especially when you're inside the circle, but the trick to that is this. The fire bats are always going to go around the circle in terms of order of how they fly at you. And also, they tend to be a little less scary to dodge when at very close range, once you get practice with it. 1, 2. Spin slashes. 1, 2. So, keep in mind that if you're less practiced with this, it's okay. You can pause buffer. Now you can see I wasn't really prepared for pause buffering. I got hit, but that's okay because I can just react, and then we move on to phase 3. But we're really not done talking about the first 2 phases yet, so we'll deal with that in time. Alright, so we've talked about this before, but we're getting lots of Ganon teleports while trying to die. Very classy. This time I'm not going to focus on damaging Ganon, we're going to talk about when phase 1 goes wrong, when it doesn't go to ideal like that. Either because you have Master Sword, which, you know, it happens, or just other factors. You mess up, something goes wrong. So Ganon throws the trident at you, just try to be mindful. It has rules of how it moves. Get in, start getting your hits. It always fires at a consistent rhythm, and it always kind of has that boomerang effect to it. Make sure to be counting your hits mentally. And then after 12, just react to whatever RNG you get. Now, when you have Master Sword, it's a whole different ballgame. So we're going to set up for that. Essentially, what I would say is if the trident during phase 1 is concerning for you, the thing that you can best do is just let Ganon go at it for a while. Don't damage Ganon, or whack him with the fire sword so you pretend like you're damaging him even though you're not, and just focus on not letting the trident whack you. Eventually you will get used to it. So we're headed into Ganon, and this time we're going to take the Master Sword with us. Speaking of which, Gold Sword tutorial. Gold Sword tutorial is just whack each phase 6 times for phases 1 and 2. You don't need to worry about more than that. You don't have to do the fancy dash strats that I was teaching, because that's not really relevant here. So as soon as you drop into the fight, turn sideways, charge a spin. If things go well, you can get 3 hits in here. There are some Arya strats that people can do, and I am so clumsy at those, so I'm not going to teach you them wrong. Note that when Ganon is in these upper corners, you can stand above him and get free double spins as long as you're not about to get tridented, which I was, because the phase isn't over. So essentially this is just the same, but you have to be a bit more careful of the trident because you're going to deal with knockback after every hit you do. And then eventually you get 12 hits and you move on to phase 2. Alright, this is phase 2 I believe. So what you can do during phase 2 is you get inside wherever the circle is going to be and you set a Samaria block. I'm going to make a save state for this. I certainly can't remember my save state function. I think it's shift. Yeah. Okay, so what you want to do, face north or south, charge your spin, and then when you let go, hold up or down. Unfortunately, in this case, my positioning was a little off. Ideally, you want to set the block somewhere where if it moves a little bit due to you being imperfect at it, you don't push it out of range. If you do that, and you can kind of get cheap spins, and then just do the little dodges. If you get up here, you get really lucky, because you get to stand in the corner for free, just spinning over and over. Additionally, you can get out by hookshotting. The same is not true for the upper left corner about the hookshot escape. okay? So don't rely on that too much. Now this time I'm going to wait so I can show you a little bit of how to deal with the scenario where you're working with the upper left. I'm also going to refill my HP so I don't make extra work for myself. Okay. Good call. So this is one of those positions where, once again, you just have to be mindful. The circle always forms in an area around wherever the trident is. So when in doubt, if you're trying to get inside the circle, just be mindful of that. Now this is not the fastest way to do some Mario strats, but it is a perfectly valid way. And it's still better than being able to do nothing at all. Now if you're not comfortable with the Samaria strats, it's okay, don't go for them. The main thing you gotta know is that during the spin, you have to be holding up or down, or rather, whatever's perpendicular to where your block is, which in Ganon fight, it's gonna be up or down. So just deal with those, and we'll deal with the fact that Ganon seems to be too grumpy to go into the upper right here. Or the upper left. We're waiting. Come on. This is too funny. Always keep in mind, if you're scared about dodging things, just pause buffer. Select buffer, whichever you prefer. Well, while we're waiting about this, I'd like to mention one other thing. I didn't really talk about mimic clipping, which is something you can do to pass mimics 1 and 2 with no bow. The reason I didn't go into too much detail about that is because you can do it with the buffers or unbuffered, and for whatever reason I've never been able to execute it except unbuffered, and the unbuffered technique really hurts my hand, so I don't do it anymore. So if I tried to do that, I would have been unhappy for the rest of this video. Okay, finally. Oh, you can force the teleport positions with the practice act menu. So if he gets up here, you know, you're essentially going to do the same thing, but you don't want to get bounced into the corner. So either try to be exactly centered with him, or be slightly off to the right, so you just get bounced right a little bit and adjust back in. Now, when this happens, you have multiple options. You have to make sure not to walk into him. You can hookshot spam and then escape to the right. Or another thing you can do is, if you're willing to bail early, before the fire circle comes immediately in, and this is boots only by the way, another thing you can do is you can bounce off the wall, and if you do it right off to the side, in fact we're just going to tank this. I didn't do that right, but the idea is you'd come over here a little farther and bail by bonking south. Now, if you're not interested in Samaria strats, what you can do is you just kind of tediously get into most of the time, be diagonal to him so you don't get knocked into uncomfy places. We'll still make it through okay. In fact, we're going to show the whole phase, pretending either you don't have the Cane of Samaria or you're just not comfortable with it, which that's okay. That wasn't how I mean to do things. I forgot I didn't have the health refill yet. What am I doing? Please pardon me. Okay. HP filled. So keep in mind that during this phase, the bats will do 2 damage. 4 damage if you're on green mail. Scales down from there if you have mail upgrades, which is good, but keep in mind how much health you have, so if you're worried that you're gonna die, make sure to use your safeties. So this scenario, if you're not doing Samaria, you can get those first 2 hits in early, but then you bail over here to the wall, and you just wait it out, okay? So otherwise it's not going to go well. So essentially the same is true of most of these positions, but if Ganon is here or here, if you're not willing to use Samaria strats, I would say you either get a hit in before he starts at all, or you just say, I'm going to wait, and you wait near the north walls, off to the corners, because otherwise this is going to be too much to deal with. But in essence, that's the majority of what you need to know for the first 2 phases of Ganon. As long as you're comfortable dodging the trident throws, and practice, and you're going to need to practice a lot to deal with the various patterns. And I do recommend learning the Samaria strats if you can, so you'll be able to get damage in more reliably and have to wait out fewer cycles. But you'll eventually just make it through okay. Something I would say can also be good for you is if you practice with scenarios where you have fewer health in the practice hack, like pretend you don't have safeties, because I mean, you can just make a save state at the start of phase 2. That way you get used to it and you don't have to worry as much. Now I'm going to move on to phase 3 and 4, but we're going to need just a moment. I just got to refill my water. I'm sorry, this will take less than a minute. Okay, sorry, my throat was just getting a little dry. But we should be good to go now. Yeah, I had a glass of water when I started, and I sure needed more. I actually drank a full glass before I started too. It's just it's June, it's getting hot, so that's certainly not helping. So anyway, we're moving on to phase 3. As you hit Ganon, most of the time, especially when you have Tempered Sword, you're not going to have to worry about these fire bats because you're going to get in your heads before they get off. But I will say this, it just seems to be a bad luck thing, where Ganon loves to cause problems. Now, I'm actually going to upgrade to the Tempered Sword here, so I want to show something. Let's say you get caught out of position, Ganon gets off a fire bat. You want to make sure you keep in mind that the fire bat will still fly around and do its thing during the stop part of the cutscene. I'm going to show that again. Oh, never mind, I'm not going to show that again. I'm a liar now. But essentially, if the fire bat gets off and you still get your hit in, that's good, but just make sure you're A, positioned somewhere that's going to be relatively safe while you cannot move. Or 2, you are prepared to tank a hit, and make sure that if you are near a pit, that you are not holding a direction on the D-pad, or else you will go flying and potentially take a fall and have to start over. And it can really be bad when you're doing Master Sword again for the first time, and you triumphantly make it through phase 2, and then exactly that happens, and it's just very demoralizing, so just be aware of what's happening. Okay, so other than that, there isn't really too much to say about phase 3. Chase Ganon, whack him when you can. The first time you attempt Ganon in any seed, you're going to have the same RNG for the teleports as your opponent, so, you know, don't stress it too much. If you die, you'll get different RNG. That could be a good or a bad thing, but there's really no way to know. Now, something you will have to keep in mind as well is... I'm trying to think of how to put it. You know what? It can't be that important if I can't think of how to say it. That's okay. So let us move on to phase 4. I actually prepared the phase 4 save state in advance. I just don't remember which one it is. I think it's this one. So you've done Ganon, you've got on your hits, and you're going into phase 4. We will backtrack to phase 3 at some point to talk about one little thing. But we're going to talk about Silverless and Silver Strats. First off, the torch glitch. The easiest way to do it is to use the lamp. Oh. Hold on, that's the wrong save state. Forgive me. Okay, so the easiest way to do the torch glitch is you've started phase 4, and so you just have the lamp, and you just kind of spam it. That's nice. With the lamp, it's just good because it's safe. You can just spam, you don't have to think too much. You don't have to worry about whether or not you learned the timing if you're using the lamp. And in fact, you probably don't want to worry about timing too specifically if you're using the lamp, unless you're in a very weird magic management scenario, which hopefully you won't be. But essentially what can happen is if you try to activate your fire item on the exact same frame that the torch goes out, then you just won't do anything. so if you're going for that perfect shot, just be mindful of that. So let's talk about the fire rod. You can see I like to do it from the middle. So I don't pause buffer it in real time, but essentially once the last tile falls away, shoot, and you'll make it. Now I'll show that in real time without buffering. You can also do it by audio. If you know exactly how many times that little sound is going to go off, when you hear the last one, if you fire at that moment, you'll make it from half court. The half court shot works that way. That wasn't the correct timing. Now, keep in mind, for those of you who play rhythm games, in a rhythm game, you're essentially trying to, like, functionally play the instrument yourself for timing. That's not what I'm talking about. If you do that shot at the exact instant that you would expect to hear that sound, then that's actually not going to work. You're going to be just a little bit too early. So it's when you hear the sound, immediately react by shooting. It's fine. And then the visual cue is when the last tile falls. Now, there's another way you can do it. I see a lot of people. This is in a scenario for when you don't have the lamp. You get up on the torch directly, and this is a visual reaction. Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to move exactly adjacent to the torch, and you're going to use the fire rod, and the timing for this is you're just going to trust in your reflexes, and the exact moment you see the torch go out, once you have visually confirmed it, immediately press the button. That's also a perfectly valid setup. Whichever you like is comfortable, but those are good ways to do your fire rod torch glitch. Once again, if you had the lamp, that's always going to be the safest way, because it's really hard to screw it up as long as, you know, you had the magic to use the lamp a few extra times, which you almost always will. So don't worry about it too much. Once you've gotten your torch glitch, let's talk about the actual mechanics of dealing with Ganon. So one thing is, Ganon, obviously, you don't want to be doing sword slings. Everybody always does sword spins no matter which sword tier they have for this. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to talk about the fire bats. Fire bats, Ganon always fires them after teleport after the same amount of time. At the instant the fire bat is fired, it will move in a straight line towards you from its location of spawn. So there's no randomness to that, it's just a very consistent pattern. That also means if you move in a direction that makes sense, you'll never have a problem with this. For example, you can move perpendicular to the direction it's traveling. It's fine. Essentially, as long as you're not moving where you're trying hopelessly to outrun it, or you're just way too close, something like that, you're going to be okay. So with Ganon, I talked before I went into Aga 2, about the fact that your sword spin is an AoE. It's active the whole time that the sword spin is active. Sorry, I should explain. AoE means area of effect. Just essentially, the whole ring around you is being attacked for every frame of the sword spin. So, Ganon's timing is technically a little tight for a sword swing, as I demonstrated earlier. But if you get in, slightly overlap with the hitbox just a little bit, and do your sword spin, then you'll pretty much always get it. So let's show that actually in a live scenario. Let him fire, get into position, go. Let him fire, get into position, go. Essentially, since you need to dodge the fire bat first, that part of the rhythm always goes naturally. You don't have to think about the timing of the sword spin, as long as you don't let the fire bat hit you. You can see, I can even get close to him as long as I'm moving perpendicular to the fire bat's eventual travel path. If you know which way the fire bat's going to go, you always know what's going to be perpendicular, and it's very safe. It's never going to turn around and hit you. Nothing unexpected is going to happen. Alright, so I'm going to reset that part of the fight so I can talk about something else. Now this time, I didn't do the torch glitch. I'm smart. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about this. You need to make sure that you are paying attention to the way that you are going to bounce. Not a big deal, but just be aware. Because if you're in a scenario where a sword spin would bounce you into a pit, which hopefully I can engineer this. See, that's fine, but I would have fallen into the pit if I wasn't holding against it. If your bounce after doing one of these sword spins is going to knock you into a pit, or you think it might, just make sure to be holding in the direction opposing the pit. If you do, then before Link's sword spin goes off, you'll already be holding against it, and so Link will just walk back up onto safe territory. As long as you do that and be aware, you won't have an unfortunate fall most of the time, and it should be okay. Another thing to keep in mind is if you get hit by one of these fire bats, you want to just not hold in any direction, or you'll go in the opposite direction of wherever. And that can mean bad things. Well, it's what's going to cause your Ganon falls most of the time. I'm apparently not letting one happen, but it can occur. Now let's talk about contingencies. This time, you messed up the torch glitch. It's unfortunate, but, you know, it's going to happen sometimes. So, most of the time, what's going to happen is if you're using Fire Rod, you're going to spend 2 shots to get 2 spins. That means you're going to need 12 Fire Rod shots. A whole bar of magic isn't going to cut it anymore. You can also use the lamp. That's a lot slower. You'll either get 1 spin, or if things go really well, you might get 2. But it's going to be a real grind of a fight now. There's not much you can do about it. So that's one reason that it's also sometimes worth to have safeties. If something goes wrong like that, you can use presumably your green or blue potion so that you can continue to do the double Fire Rod shots. Something else I see happen here. I want to just show it as clearly as possible. I will see runners who have a full bar of half magic, they have Tempered Sword, they have the Fire Rod, they got the Torch Glitch, and they keep using the lamp. And, you know, I can understand you're feeling the heat of the race, you have nerves, but this is going to be slower because you have to go over to the torch every time, and it's just going to take more time. So just, if you have resources, just know what you have and you can use it. But yeah, this is pretty much what you need to know about this Ganon fight. One additional thing is that if one torch is on, just one, Ganon can't contact damage you. However, that changes as soon as the second torch is lit. So just be clear, you do something like this, you know, that's a scary position to be in. I'm somehow bad at pressing the Fire Rod button right now, it's great. You get what I'm trying to get across. You want to make sure that you're in a scenario where you don't let Ganon teleport on top of you. Now we're going to backtrack a little bit to Phase 3 here. And we'll do that the slow way, show Phase 1 and 2 again. Now you can see this time what I was talking about earlier. My shadow is below that line on the grid, so I'm going to miss the swing. I need to make sure that I react appropriately. I can still get the 1 cycle for Phase 1, but it's tight. I didn't get it. That's okay. If you're going to take a death during the Ganon fight, doing it at the very beginning is the least painful, right? Wow, I did this totally wrong. That's great. Yeah, that's okay. We're going to do silly time. That's not how you do it. I think I still had a... what? Yeah, this is perfectly fine. This is Phase 2. We're just going to upgrade our gear real quick. Here, we'll use the gold sword. We'll be real cheap. Okay, so Phase 3, there's one other thing I want to talk about, and that is ending Phase 3. So we're going to get in our 3 hits, and then at the 4th, we're going to pop a save state so I can make a point. Okay, get the 4th hit. So, get the 4th hit and immediately charge a spin. And then, during this text box, let it go. If Ganon doesn't stay in position, if Ganon teleports along the line, then you'll get a free silverless hit. And that's awesome when that happens. Or I could just miss. Now, you will cause Ganon to freeze if he just chooses not to teleport, if he says, this is the spot where I want to be. And then we just kind of put it all together and do all our tech here. So one last note about Phase 4. When you have Ganon already in the middle of doing something, he'll pull out his cape like that before teleporting. Depending on how long he is along his pattern, you'll have a certain number of frames to get a silverless hit. And if you time it right, then you can just kind of steal the hit back and get back along the pattern. That's just something you kind of have to practice and get a feel for. If too much time passes, it can become pretty much frame perfect. Which, if you get good at that, then, you know, you'll impress people, but it's hard. But that's essentially most of the Ganon fight. I'm trying to think if there are factors I didn't cover. Are there any questions? Oh my god, I didn't cover the most basic thing. Phase 4 was silvers, of course. Okay, we'll do that real quick. So Phase 4 of silvers, obviously you don't care about getting the silverless hits because it doesn't really matter, but as long as you have 4 arrows, you can get it done. Get that, get our silverless shot in. Miss the torch glitch, doesn't matter. So the funny thing about the torch glitch is when you have silverless, you know you're going to want it all the time, but when you have silvers, there are scenarios where you might choose to miss it. For example, if Ganon is in a position where after activating the torches the first time, he'll be caught in the middle of the room, then you can do 2 shots, hit him, and get a triple. The dash strats on Phase 2. The reason that works is because an enemy cannot contact damage you and be invulnerable at the same time. So you hit Ganon, his iframes activate, and then you're safe as long as you get out of his hitbox while his iframes are going. That's the reason. If you're not comfortable with the dash strats, it's worth practicing because that lets you consistently skip a Ganon cycle. But if you're not comfortable with it, you can get some hits to the side, deal with the fire bats. It'll be a little slower that way. If Ganon is in the far left or far right positions where he's not against the wall, you'll just use slashes with tempered or gold. So that's fine. You just have to make sure you get to position to end phase 1 with 5 slashes in time, and then you just get your 12 for phase 2. I just never happen to get that RNG while teaching this. They're out of magic. How sad. But essentially, so another thing to note with silver is I'm going to try to bait out RNG that lets me show this. We're going to wait for the torches. I wait, fire. This lets me get probably a double. Well, no, he died. Never mind. Okay. All equipment needs to be set to what I need first. Okay, we're going to remake the save state. There we go. I think this is the wrong save state. It doesn't matter, though. So what I'd like to do here is the same principle applies where if you kind of end on a hit, you can use a sword slash, and if he doesn't teleport, you can freeze him immediately and get a silver in. Didn't happen. Get our shot in. Get our torch glitch, and then so you can get multiple hits into Ganon using the silvers. What you need to do is essentially freeze him, be sideways from him in such a way that firing an arrow in a line will hit him, and then fire, move a little bit, fire again. If Ganon hits a torch or the side of the pit, then you won't be able to get any more shots in no matter how much time you have. So if you can see from the distance of the knockback, and your estimation is that it's not going to happen, you can save yourself a silver shot. Probably doesn't really matter unless you're trying to make every arrow count, though. But yeah, that's pretty much Ganon. Actually, I guess there's one last thing to talk about here. When this fanfare starts playing, if you are way to extreme north, Link won't put up his sword because you won't have actually activated the cutscene. Not only will this make it take longer for you to get out of the room, because you still have to go through the entire duration of the fanfare cutscene when you move in. If you're not looking, if you're getting ready to do a done or something, and your sword isn't up, then what's going to happen is that as you're holding up like you're ready to go on the door. So here's my advice. The fanfare cutscene, you can't skip it anyway. So just visually confirm that you are holding your sword up, or if somehow you're playing a swordless race in the future, make sure that Link is holding his fist up. And that way, that's when you know it's safe to just hold up. And that's all you had to do. But if you don't keep that in mind, it'll probably happen to you eventually. It's happened to me, it's happened to other people, and it can cost you a race, and it feels bad when it does. So try to avoid that. Confirm the sword is up, and then hold up. So with all that, if you just go over the things in this video and practice them a lot, some things, I make look admittedly a little easier than they are just because I have a lot of experience with all this. But that said, that's going to give you a good foundation of stuff to practice on, so you know effectively how all the rules of these fights work. And that should basically be the point where as long as you practice and keep at it, you'll see your results pay off. You will improve, and eventually you'll be able to make it look this easy too, probably. So that said, are there any questions about any of this? Okay, well, I waited a little bit. Seems like there are no questions. So I'm glad that occasional little bumps in the road that this has been a helpful and informative tutorial. I hope that a lot of you are able to either improve your games or at least get some ideas from it. It's been a lot of fun. I was very honored that they reached out to me, the Ganon podcast team, to teach this particular part of the game. And with that, I hope that you all have a great night. Once again, do check the channels for this in the Discord. In a little while, I'll provide a link to a proper tutorial for how to set up the bomb jump for the right side if you need to do that. Though I will stress again, that's one of the last things you should be practicing. Focus on the rest first, especially that Ganon. A good Ganon fight is going to win you so many races if you get used to it. So, once again, thanks for watching, and have a great night.